Greetings gamers, ex-gamers and friends and family members of gamers. Well, we've made it to day 11. By this time I should definitely have thought I would be suffering from some kind of withdrawal symptoms. But so far nothing that can't be written off by a simpler explanation. That being said, yesterday I did have a bit of a weird dream where I dreamed I was in a mathematics class and I stood in front of a blackboard talking about finding the square root of complex numbers. Yeah, I have dreams like that. And so I plotted the complex number using polar coordinates, and I was standing in front of a blackboard with complex number plotted, and I completely forgot what to do next. I was so embarrassed that I couldn't remember the next step of finding the square root of a complex number that I woke myself up. Yes, in case you hadn't noticed, I'm a strange person. I don't usually remember my dreams, but this one was quite disturbing. I don't usually put much stock in dreams, but I think this one was more to do with feelings of inadequacy, because yesterday I felt I wasn't prepared for what to do next after I'd covered the remorse section of the cycle of addiction. Other than that, I've had nothing that I could report as a withdrawal symptom. I've had no temptation to game despite being surrounded by triggers, and I seem to have settled into a nice routine which doesn't involve gaming. It's still relatively early days though, so I'm not going to declare myself not a gaming addict until I've completed the whole challenge. In the next few videos, I want to discuss risk factors and vulnerabilities. What makes some people game as much as they like, or booze whenever they feel like it, or eat whatever they fancy whenever they fancy, or place a bet whenever they feel like it, with apparently no ill effects, and yet others become prisoners to gaming or gambling addiction or alcoholism or develop an eating disorder. There's no simple answer to this question, although by far the greatest influence seems to be genetics. According to the American Psychiatric Association, genetics are probably as high as 60% responsible for determining if you're going to become addicted. So what is genetics? Well, genetics is the study of genes. The idea that traits of parents can be passed down to children have been known since prehistoric times, and we humans have been successfully using artificial selection to breed and domesticate animals since well before the invention of language. However, the modern understanding of genetics probably dates to the Augustinian monk Gregor Mendel, who should not be confused with Dmitri Mendeleev, who invented the periodic table of the elements, or the evil Nazi doctor Joseph Mengele, who committed unspeakable atrocities in the name of science. Gregor Mendel did important experiments on pea plants in the mid to late 1800s that proved once and for all that certain traits were hereditary and that some traits were dominant and others were recessive. His work earned him the title of Father of Modern Genetics. We have probably heard of other great scientists like Charles Darwin and Francis Crick and James Watson, who made huge contributions to our understanding of how genetics plays a role in determining what we look like and possibly how we behave. And we probably haven't heard of equally great scientists like George Beadle and Edward Tatum, who showed that specific genes code for specific proteins. And although much progress has been made in our understanding of how genes express themselves, we are still a very long way from truly understanding the role that genetics plays in the development of addictions. Finding identical twins separated at birth are a geneticist's struck oil moment, because how their lives have turned out helps determine what attributes are most affected by the environment and what attributes are most affected by genetics. Unfortunately, these are extremely rare, so other means have to be sought to answer these questions. In the absence of identical twins separated at birth, cross-adoption studies prove quite useful. What is interesting is that cross-adoption studies have shown that children of alcoholic parents who were adopted at birth by non-alcoholic parents are between 4 and 10 times more likely to become alcoholics than children of non-alcoholic parents. Now, it could be argued that children who grew up in adopted families may feel increased isolation and therefore be more susceptible to alcoholism, but studies of children of non-alcoholic parents adopted at birth into alcoholic families were far less likely to become alcoholics than the children born to alcoholic parents. This and other studies strongly indicate a link between genetics and addiction. In previous videos, we've looked at the importance of neurotransmitters in the functioning of nerve cells. One of the many substances collectively known as neurotransmitters is dopamine. One of the receptors that detect the presence of dopamine is called the D2 receptor. Some studies have shown that low levels of D2 receptors increase a person's predisposition to alcoholism. D2 receptors are encoded by the DRD2 gene located on chromosome 11 in humans. One would be tempted to think that a genetic test for mutations in the DRD2 gene could identify if a person is more or less likely to become an alcoholic. If only it were that simple. It's very rare to find a one-to-one relationship between a mutation in a specific gene and a uniquely identifiable behavior pattern. Sometimes scientists can identify a specific gene responsible for a specific condition, like the link between a mutation in the BRCA gene and breast cancer, but again, not all breast cancer patients have the specific mutation in the BRCA gene, so even when it's apparently simple, it's never that simple. Often, clinical conditions involve a complex interaction between multiple genes and multiple environmental factors. We can still hope and long for the day when a simple blood test will tell us whether we're likely to become addicted to certain substances or behaviour patterns, but that day is a very long way off, and we're even further away from the day when a simple injection will be able to permanently cure an addiction. But that is the ultimate aim of geneticists who are studying addiction. Until that day comes, however, simply knowing that genetics play a large part in a person's vulnerability towards addictive behaviour can empower children of addicts to avoid environmental risk factors that may trigger their addiction. If you feel that you might have a problem with excessive gaming and are worried that you might be developing an addiction, why not follow along or try out this simple test going game-free for a month? Remember, it can be any month and you don't have to start on the first. Why not post a comment to let me know how you're doing, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. But as for me, big fat hairy 10 days and counting non-gamer who sometimes has strange dreams, I look forward to seeing you in another video.